My name is Jim Olver, and I want to welcome you all to Canoeing Live. A special welcome to newcomers and welcome back to all you other paddlers. Canoeing Live is a virtual event series produced by Devin Ingram, Thomas Olver, and myself, and we're aiming to celebrate canoeing, hear from experts, and share amongst ourselves as we build a canoeing community. And I'm proud to be speaking from Treaty 7 territory, traditional lands of the Stoney Nakoda, Blackfoot, Métis, and the Tsuut'ina nations. Here on Canoeing Live, we're really trying to make connection before we engage in comment. And so we take the first 5-10 minutes of the event to chat and welcome everyone. And if I haven't welcomed you all individually, sorry, and I'll try to do that while we're here. We're going to do some polling tonight. We found that polling is a fun way to get to know who's joined us for the evening. And each speaker has said to us that they've been surprised at the results of the poll. So we're going to do that again tonight. We encourage question and answers throughout the event. And as you'll see, we'll be sharing audience photos a little bit later in the program. And for those of you who have time, once we finish the show by 8:30, we welcome you to stay and for the after party. And we can just chat a little bit at that point. We're starting a 2-session series on canoe cooking. And we thought we could do it in one, but we find there's lots of material for 2. And I think those of us who go canoeing, we're all interested in eating too. And so the 2 parts, the first will be called Canoe Cookery, and that's tonight with Jim Buckingham and Doug McKown. And then our next session in August will be Canoe Cooking Cornucopia with Chip Olver and Mary Buckingham. So it's a 2-part series. And tonight is Canoe Cookery. And I enjoyed picking out this photo today. Look, we've got a hard-working cook there, right on the shore of some lake. I think this is the shore of the Reindeer River. And look at those 4 people waiting patiently for dinner. And then the second part is Canoe Cooking Cornucopia with Chip Olver and Mary Buckingham. And look at this picture I dug out. This is on the Green River. Oh, there's Mary just waiting to get in too. So that'll be in the next session. So for polling, we're going to ask the group, have you questions about camping and cooking? I'll just highlight them here and then we'll start the poll. First question is, have you canoe camped? The second, do you prefer to cook using fire or stove? And we hope that there's some hot discussion about that item. And have you ever baked using a fire? So I'm just going to stop the sharing and go to the polling. So I'm launching the poll. There. Can you see the poll? Please answer. Number 1, have you canoe camped? Oh, they're racing through there. %8 have canoe camped. We've got the right audience tonight. Wow. We're going to take 10 more seconds here. That's more for me to get organized than it is for people to vote. Okay, end of polling. Have you canoe camped? Yes, 82% have canoe camp, 27 out of the 33 votes. Do you prefer to cook over a fire? 48%. And a stove, 52%. Pretty evenly. And have you ever baked using a fire? 52% say yes. So, what do you think of those results, Doug?
Well, that sounds just great. So we should have all sorts of views going on here. So this will be lots of fun.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for participating in that. And so now I'm just introducing people that have participated in Canoeing Live before. First of all, Doug McKown. Well, they're both legends here in the Bow Valley. They've taught so many of us how to not only canoe, but how to canoe camp. And there's Doug on the Barons River in Manitoba, cooking up some kebabs. You can see
sharing, Jim?
Not quite yet.
Yeah, let's.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
No, close that one.
Good man. So here we got the two speakers, Doug McKown and Jim Buckingham. There's Jim's favorite position when he's not paddling. He's resting, getting ready to paddle. So I'm going to, I'm proud to introduce these two fellas, and I'm going to stop sharing now and let Doug take control for Canoe Cookery, please, Doug and Jim.
All right, let's see if we can get something going here.
Looks like it's coming.
Is it coming? Is everyone there?
Yeah, there you go. Dale.
Hang on, I've got something on here. Oh, there we are. Whoops. Okay, so I can't see the top of my picture. So can I get rid of this?
It looks full screen from here.
All right. Does look full screen from there? Good. Well, that's all we really need to know. So tonight, camp cookery is, as Jim said, a big topic. So what we did is try and split her into two here. And Jim and I are going to talk more about sort of the mechanics and what we use and how we do it, rather than the actual what we cook and all that sort of stuff, which will be the girls next time. So we'll carry on here and see what happens. If you have any things, comments, or questions, just put them in the chat, and hopefully we can get some discussion going that way, and we'll see what happens here. First of all, I wanted to start with the debate, just for fun, so that everybody can see what's going on here. And this is, of course, stove versus fire. So what I'm going to do here is list a whole bunch of reasons to do both. And this is absolutely, totally subjective and biased from my point of view. And you can all just think about what you guys like. So stoves to begin with. As far as stoves cooking, well, as far as I'm concerned, stove is just more junk to carry on your canoe and on your portages. So you sort of see where my view is coming from here. Stoves, of course, subject to mechanical failure, and that just turns them into an annoying chunk of scrap metal. And you have to carry fuel. You can't burn a stove without fuel, so you got to carry that stuff along. And burning a stove, it might be a little controversial, but it's probably a little more environmentally unfriendly than a nice small fire. That's another personal view. And if you're burning pressurized fuel, then you have to carry those empty canisters. And those are more useless than the broken stove. And it's very difficult to bake on a stove. It can be done, but it's not so easy. And of course, you're limited to the number of things that you can cook at one time. And it's boring to cook on stoves. So there you go. And that gives you my personal view of the program here. On the other hand, you have a nice little cooking fire. And fires oops. Fires are nice. They don't take up any space. They're absolutely weightless. You don't have to carry fuel. Your fuel is there all the time. And your fuel is free. Absolutely free. Well, depending on where you go, of course, but most places your fuel is free. You can cook a number of things at one time on a good fire. You can have them spread out, cook all sorts of things. And baking is only limited by your imagination. You can bake all sorts of things on a fire. And of course, fires are just way more fun. So these are all absolutely personal opinions, but that's sort of the way we're looking at things here. So to carry on, we do indeed stoves. There's no doubt about it. And there's lots of reasons that we do choose or have to use a stove. One of them is if you're using actual commercial campsites or provincial campsites, a lot of them don't allow open fires, or they have those horrible metal pits that you really can't cook anything in anyway, and you're forced to use a stove. Or if you're in an area where there's a fire ban, then of course you can't use an open fire and you're forced to use a stove. If you're on one of those nice canoe trips that have absolutely no portages and it doesn't matter at all what you carry, then sure, take a stove, take 2 or 3. But all the same reasoning applies as far as I'm concerned. There's no fuel available. If you're paddling in the Arctic or the Barrens, there's lots of places where there is simply no fuel for a fire, and you're obligated to use a stove. So what we normally take is a stove like the one in this picture, 2 burners, propane, and a 5-pound propane tank will take us through pretty much any kind of a canoe trip. If you are using stoves, then you need to consider how much or how many you need. A little 1-burner camp stove is not enough for really more than 2 people, and you'll need more stoves for that. 2 burners is pretty much a minimum. What kind of fuel you use, whether you use white gas, whether you use compressed container fuel or propane, it's all up to you. But these are sort of the reasons we do end up using stoves if we can't avoid the whole problem. Now, when I was looking at this, we sort of wanted to look at what's different about canoe cooking than it is about other kinds of outdoor cooking. Whether you're backpacking or skiing or biking or hiking or any of those things. And it's the differences we wanted to focus on. And the differences, of course, are that canoes are nice and big and you can carry all sorts of stuff in them. But one of the things you want to think about if you're on canoe trips is that you need somewhere to cook. And most of the time, you know, for years and years, a nice big open piece of granite is a great thing to work on. But as you get more experienced, and that is you get older, you're looking for something a little more comfortable and working on the ground all the time. And that's when some sort of table is in order. And because you have a nice big canoe, you can carry some sort of table. And there's lots of things out there. One of the easiest things to use is a canoe table. And we use this from time to time. It's very easy to do. 2 barrels, canoe, gives you a good sized table, quite a friendly height, and you don't have to carry any more extra equipment along with you. And you have a nice big table. Now, of course, depending on the kind of canoe you're using, the table may be a little more slopey or round than you really want, but it provides pretty good surface and it's very handy and easy. So that's certainly an option anybody can use. There are lots of camp tables available. And if you're going to be looking for something like that, you want to be a little bit careful about what you get, because a lot of them are small, light, they're pretty much all collapsible, but the emphasis here is on small. If you've got a nice canoe and you're going to be out there carrying stuff, have something that's going to work for you. So we paddle a big canoe, so we looked for something a little more friendly, and we found that this table, the top rolls up, comes apart, and it's quite easy to carry. So that's what sort of works best for us. But the things you're looking for, if you're looking around for something to use as a table, you want something that's first high enough to make it friendly to use. It's got to have a big enough table surface so you can spread all your junk out. And it's got to be strong enough and stable enough so it's not going to fall over. So there's lots of things. If you're going to be canoe camping, a good table is in order. And I'll be interested to hear what other people use for this sort of thing, because I'm sure there's lots of them out there.
Excuse me, Doug, could I interrupt,
Certainly.
please?
Please do.
I've been watching the chat, and certainly fire bans have come up quite a bit, and we can understand that with the weather we've been getting. So I guess you've always got to have a stove with you. What's your thoughts?
We always carry a backup stove of some sort in case the fire breaks down. Bucky, how many times, to your knowledge, have we actually had to use that emergency stove that we carry? Well, you're muted, Jim. You need to unmute yourself, Jim. Bucky.
Does that mean I'm on now?
You're on now.
Okay. How long have we been paddling together? 45 years or something? Twice?
Something like that. Twice. Yeah. So, we always have one. And I think the only times we've used them was when we actually found out we were in a fire ban area. We haven't used them for reasons like weather or fuel or anything like that. It's always been because we haven't been able to actually have a fire for some reason. So yeah, I mean, carrying a stove along is quite a reasonable thing to do. And for us, for the four of us, we've always carried a little camp stove as a backup, but we really have rarely ever needed to use it.
The tarp has a lot to do with that. If you've got a good tarp and you can get it up, you can get the fire under the edge and make do with a fire even in the rain. And we've done that many, many times.
Rain has hardly ever been an issue. And we'll talk a bit more about that as we go on. Where was I? Oh, yes. So when you're paddling, we kind of find it useful to keep all the cooking gear in one container and spot. That makes it easy to get at, useful, and everything is where it should be. So you get out one container and you're ready to go. All your cooking stuff is there. Now, a container for this purpose is traditionally known as a wanigan. This is primarily a term from the East, and it means a food box in a canoe. And they come in lots of different shapes and sizes. Traditionally in Ontario, they're considered to be a wooden rectangular box with a flat lid that comes off. You can use it as a table, and they're traditionally carried just with a tump line. They're not normally rigged with straps or anything like that. But you will see lots of different kinds of them. But they all serve the same purpose. And the purpose is to keep all your cooking stuff contained in one place. Now we use a 30-liter barrel as our own wanigan. It carries everything we need for 4 to 6 people. All the gear, pots, pans, cutlery, utensils, all that junk, and still usually has space left over for our own lunches. And the barrel works well. It fits perfectly neatly underneath the middle thwart in our canoe, and it serves as a stool when you're in camp. It's a very handy thing. Totally waterproof, of course, and it is pretty easily accessible. Lid pops off and everything's right there. Whatever kind of container you choose, it needs to be robust because it's going to get carried around. You need to provide easy access so you can get into it, and it needs to be easily portaged. So that's just the general idea of what you're going to need if you're going to get a container to carry all this junk in your canoe. And I'll be interested to hear what kind of things other people use, because Jim uses a food box. You're on,
Hi.
Jim.
Hi. This yellow box sitting in front of these three people, that's me and Mary and Donna, Doug's wife. And you can see between Mary and the box is the lid for the box. So this is all fiberglass with hockey sticks of frame, and some of the framing is oak. It's been 52 years in the backcountry so far. A trip every year, at least one trip every year, sometimes two or maybe even three times it's out. It has been broken. You can punch through if you drop it on a rock, you can break a hole in it, but it's easily patched. Duct tape is wonderful stuff. And when you get home, you fiberglass it, just like a fiberglass canoe. So I love this box. The big feature of this one that I think, of course, I think everybody who owns a Wanigan is utterly convinced that he has the best Wanigan in the world. And I'm the same as everybody else. What I like about this one, it's not very deep, so stuff doesn't get buried in the bottom. You can have all kinds of Tupperware and screw top bottles and of all sizes and shapes, and right on the top of them, and you can find everything. And you get used to where you put it, and it's really easy. So that's one of the big advantages of it. Let's try the next slide, Doug, see what's up. Next. Ah, there it is. Now you can see the lid. The lid just fits over. There's no attempt whatsoever to make this waterproof. It's been dumped a few times into a lake, or once in the rapids, actually. And it's fine. It floats like a cork because everything that's inside there, except the plates and frying pan, is in either a plastic bottle or a plastic bag, and it floats really, really well. The inside of the box gets wet, but the food never gets wet. And it's had some long swims. You can see just sticking out from underneath there, there's one of the pack straps. So this has two pack straps. You'll see those in a minute. Other stuff in the foreground there, that's what do you call that thing, Doug, for utensils? It's very handy.
We call it the red utensil bag.
Oh, okay. That'll be different. Okay, next. Here's another use for this food box. You take the lid off, turn it at right angles, strap it down with one of the closure straps, and it's a perfect table for 2-year-olds. We seem to be having a nice time there. Those are two of my grandchildren. They were 2 years old at the time. Okay, next. There's the working side of it. That's the bottom. So the lid's underneath there. You can just see a little bit of the lid. And the two blue pack straps. And the box closure is 2-inch webbing. The pack straps have had to be replaced a couple times. That webbing is really something. It's 50 years it's been working there. You can see how the straps are fixed to the bottom of the box. There's little pieces of hockey stick, one for the top end of the straps and one in each corner for the bottom of the straps. So those are just bolted into the fiberglass with washers on the inside. Works well, never had a problem. Okay, I guess that's it. Next. Oh, here's the Wanigan, my Wanigan. I call it a food box, but anyway, I'm carrying it up a portage there. That's in Manitoba. Steep portage. We had to put a fixed rope in on that one so we could get up the hill with our loads. Anyway, that's it. I think that covers that.
That's
anything else, Jim or Doug? More
Can I
comments?
interrupt for a minute? I'm just
Please.
watching the chat. Karen Messenger was talking about a firebox, and I don't know that I've ever seen a firebox. What is one?
Fireboxes are, there's a lot of different kinds. They're basically some sort of metal container that you can build the fire right in, cook on it, and take it away with you. So there's nothing unsightly left at the scene. they're very, very popular these days, and they're certainly becoming more popular in places that have regular canoe trips. Outfitters use them a lot, and they're very nice indeed.
You can buy them from Churchill River Canoe Outfitters.
Yeah, there's lots of different kinds out there. I don't have any pictures, I'm sorry, but they do let you cook on fires just the way you would pretty much with an open fire, and not have to deal with any of the building of a fireplace or anything like that. So they're actually a very, very good thing.
All right, thank you very much. Thanks for mentioning that, Karen. And I know Mary and Chip are working the chat room real hard, so thank you for doing that, ladies. Grant has a couple comments about barrels. He likes barrels just like we do. What do you use them for, Grant?
I have to unmute myself. Yeah, I keep my food in there, and I think it's great. It throws right on top, goes up sideways on top of my pack above my head on the portage, and it keeps things like raccoons and other critters that can gnaw through other food packs, those types of things, from eating my food. I just find it's very convenient. Fits nice in the canoe as well, and so. Yep.
Yeah, we find they do work really well. We use a small one for the box, for the food box. We call it a food box. It's really just a mechanical box. It carries all the bits that you actually use to cook. We carry barrels pretty much exclusively on our trips these days. We use 4 big barrels, 2 little barrels, and that takes us pretty much forever. The thing that people often have trouble with when they first get big barrels is that they go, oh boy, I've got a big barrel, and they put all the food in it, and then nobody can lift it off the ground. So you just gotta be a little careful and spread yourself out. So you got nice even loads, of course, because you do have to carry them from time to time.
But that's the same with any Wanigan. You gotta watch how much you put in it.
Or any big pack too. People take these big portage packs and make them really, really heavy.
Yeah, we do a lot of portaging out here, so if you can't carry it, you can't move it.
Exactly.
Doug, we have a comment from Dale and Colleen Kiselik. Dale has wrapped one of their barrels in silver bubble wrap to insulate it and keep the food cool. What do you do to keep the food cool, Doug?
Well, that's something we were going to talk about later on, but right now that's just perfect. If we have most of our sort of perishable food in one barrel, what works really well is just to have a big towel, like a family size terry cloth towel, soak it in water, lay it over the barrel, and it keeps them cool just perfectly well, even on the hottest days. It certainly makes your food last much, much longer. The wrap does exactly the same thing, but the wet towels evaporate and really do keep them cool. It's quite amazing.
And they work good on my food box too.
Yeah, any kind of food box, a wet towel works very well.
All right, back to your presentation, Doug.
Excellent. Well, this is just loads of fun, hearing everybody's ideas. So as you've sort of figured out here, it doesn't really matter what you use as a food box, as long as it works for you and has the necessary characteristics to do the job. Where are we going next? Oh, we're going to fires. And people sort of somehow, a lot of people who haven't cooked on fires much seem to get a little intimidated about fires and leery about them, but they're actually quite easy and fun to work on a fire. Now this is a regular live normal fire. A metal food box or a metal fire box would be exactly the same. They use real live fires in them. So cooking on fires is great. Lots of advantages. You can cook a bunch of things at a time at all sorts of different temperatures. So they're really, really fun to cook on. The only extra piece of equipment we take for cooking on fires is a grate. So we can use that for, of course, any kind of fire. And when you can see this one here is a little bent out of shape when the heat sort of gets to it. At that point, you just go out to your nearest recycle center and grab one out of an old oven that's sitting out there, and you're ready to go again. So a grate is really all you need as additional equipment. So as far as fires go, now if you're using a firebox, as was described, you can put this pretty much anywhere. If you're using real fires like these, I don't mean real fires, but not a firebox, we try and build them right at the water's edge on bare rock if we possibly can. Our goal, of course, is to be able to leave zero evidence when you actually go. And the best way to do that is to build them as close to the water as you possibly can. Then you can just disperse the rocks, wash the nice clean ashes into the water, and you can pretty much leave sort of zero evidence. Not as much as an actual firebox, of course, but enough that after a few rains and the next season, there should be no real sign of your fire being there. So if you take enough care, you can do that. Now, if you're in sand country, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, if you can't extinguish your fire completely and totally with a paddle stroke in the lake or river, you're too far from the water.
Yeah, you make every attempt to be there.
Yeah.
Now, you can be in sand country. Now, most of you probably paddle like we have canoe tripped in the Canadian Shield, where it's all nice solid granite. But if you're in sand country, then you've got a different situation. And when we're there, normally we remove the vegetation layer, and that gets us right down to bare sand. And cooking on bare sand is quite nice. The nice thing about sand country is it's usually perfectly flat and soft and comfy. But your fire in the sand, a fireplace like this, once you're done with it, you can make it absolutely disappear. You just make sure it's completely out. Ashes go into the sand, vegetation goes back onto the top. Any rocks you use get tossed into the river, and there's no sign of your fire. So sand country is quite good to cook on. Now, this is sort of, if you're a shield paddler, sort of an ideal kind of kitchen that you're looking for. Nice, big, flat, different layers of granite, clean, right down by the water. It's just a perfect place to have a cookery. And a place like this, you should be able to leave almost spotless when you go. And that's what we're always looking for. But about fire, sorry, go ahead, Jim.
Just want to put in a plug for my food box.
Yes, there it is again, folks. Jim's food box. So this is what we're looking for, and to try and leave as little evidence as possible. Which brings me to what we usually find when you camping, which are fire rings. So this is my little rant about fire rings. And anywhere in the backcountry you go these days, on any canoe route that's used at all, you're going to come up to what looks like a nice campsite, and you're going to find a fire ring, or two or three. And they're awful. People build these rings, they leave them full of dirty ashes and usually garbage. They usually build them on the nicest, flattest tent site of the whole campground, and they're left there. So they're really, people build these for campfires usually, and they have their campfire and they just paddle away and leave it. And I just can't understand it. And the worst offenders, these are offenders in my subjective view, are the people that get to camp, they cook on a stove, and then they build a big fire ring for a campfire, and they leave it there. So what we try and do whenever we get to campsites is remove old fire rings. We use the rocks for our own little cooking fire, disperse all the rest, try and clean up the ashes and get them out, and remove the evidence of previous fire rings. Because you'll find 2 or 3 of these at a really nice campsite, and they really are awful. Some campsites that are well used will have a great big fire ring thing built into a whole big, enormous barbecue sort of thing. A lot of them, once they get big enough, you can't really do anything about them. But if you're out there and you find these little fire rings in your campsites, just get rid of them so that everybody can get to the campsite and not find dirty, smelly, old fire rings all over the place. That's my little rant. Do you have anything to add to that?
Tell us
Doug,
what you really think, Doug.
Doug, we have a question from Lori and Lynn. Would you use an existing fire pit or build a new one closer to the shore?
Well, you know, that depends on the fire ring. If it's a big one and we don't think we're going to be able to take it down, dismantle it enough and really get rid of it, then we'll use it. We'll clean it up afterwards and get all the ashes out and make it as nice as possible. But really big fire rings are already there, we'll use. If it's just a small fire ring, we'll take the rocks down to shore and build our own little fire and try and remove all trace of the previous fire ring. So our goal is to leave no fire rings, no trace of the fire when you leave your campsite. That's the goal. You can't always do it, but that's what we're aiming towards.
The other thing I think, if you build a fire ring and you haven't dug down to sand, I think it's possible to get sparks in underneath the rocks into the moss, and it might take 2 weeks, but it flares up.
Yeah, you do. I mean, just basic fire management of making sure you're on bare rock or clear sand when you're building a fire is absolutely basic.
The ring does nothing to stop the fire from spreading.
The rings don't really do much of anything. I mean, if we have clear rock, we need 4 rocks to hold up our fire grate. That's all we do. We don't build a big ring. We just build 4 rocks, or 2 if you've got a ledge. Like that's all we're using the rocks for. Fire rings for actually containing the fire aren't really necessary. If you need to contain your fire is too big. Yeah. That's our view anyway. Okay, so much for my rant. We'll carry on. So, baking is one of the most fun things we do on the fire. And the only reason we're going to talk about this a bit is because it's a little bit of more equipment that we carry on that's different than you would have when you're backpacking or biking or skiing or that sort of thing. One of the great ways to bake is to use a reflector oven. So over to our reflector oven expert, Mr. Bucky.
Yeah, this baby's been with me a long time too. You have to clean it up every 3 or 4 years and steel wool it out, but still flying good. A lot of years in that thing. So the idea here is it's easy to get heat under what you want to cook, but it's hard to get heat to come down on the top like an oven does, like a gas oven or an electric oven does. So that's the function of the reflector oven. The top plate there reflects the heat from the fire down onto the top of what you're baking. I don't know, what else am I missing there?
Not much, but the nice thing about this particular reflector oven, even though we're paddling a nice big canoe, it folds up to not near nothing.
Yes, and that's the rods that go through, and the pot or pan or whatever you're cooking in sits on those rods, and they just go through holes in the sidewalls of the reflector. So it's pretty light and certainly compact. It fits really nice in my food box, as a matter of fact. Okay, here we are in action. I'm cooking bannock here. The real trick with this is you need something to hold your fire in a vertical position. So we're real close to the water here. We've propped up the oven with rocks in this case. Sometimes you have to put one under one of the corners there to raise it, because you must get your rods level. So especially if you're doing cakes or something liquid, you really need those rods to be level. And to get them level, take a pan with nothing in it, put enough water in it to cover the bottom, and it's a hell of a good level. And you'll get your level right on just by looking around the edge of the water in it. Anyway, here's the fire. We build a little fire against, in this case, a rock. We can throw that rock in the lake. Ledges are good. So you got a vertical wall of rock, of bedrock, like that. That's looking right down on the fire. So you need something to get your wood vertical. So you start a small campfire with pencil-sized wood as the maximum. Then you start putting in about foot long, no more than 2 inches in diameter, nice dry wood. If you can find wood that diameter, you just have to cut it. If you can't, you might have to split with an axe or something like that. This fire in this picture is quite nice because the wind is obviously from the right side of the picture there. You can see the flames licking out over the reflector. That one's cooking the top really well. This one has another, is that a log behind it?
Yep.
You can use a log behind to hold it, to get the oven level. It's a little bit of a juggling act to get the back of the reflector level and hold down the front.
Yeah,
A little bit of
I was
rock
just-
work. Go ahead, Doug.
Sorry, Jim, I was just going to say about this picture. This, as you can tell, is in sand country. And although there's nice things about camping in sand country, one of the other problems is there can be lots of not rocks. Now, it took me quite a while to get this one rock out of the river, which is where I found it, and up onto the bank to where we could bake with it. But everything else is sand. That's why we're using a log to hold up the tin, and there were just no rocks. So we were very lucky to get this one. And as you can see, it worked really, really well.
The other thing about cooking with a reflector oven, don't even think about going anywhere away from the fire. Things happen fast when you're not there. When you're there, it's boring. When you're not there, it's far too exciting. So I'm peering in, is it cooking? And you'll notice I've got one gloved hand and one ungloved hand. That's for reaching in and turning the pan, because I always want to turn it the same way so I don't forget and turn it back the other. But I turn when 1/4 is pretty cooked, I turn it and get another 1/4 in there. So 3 turns with a glove on one hand, pretty easy. And you can see the firewood there leaning up against, that's a flat rock, a small rock there for the fire support, I guess we call it. I think there's a rock under the back of the reflector there.
Yep, that's a pretty standard setup for baking with a reflector oven right by the water, and it's working just perfectly. You do that for a little while, and you have bannock for another day.
Once you
So,
get just one more point here.
Sure,
Once
no,
you
go ahead.
get the oven heated up, if you're making bannock, once you got it up to temperature, you can cook bannock really fast, like 5 or 6 minutes, and you're done. So
That's
if
'cause it's pretty
you
dry,
can bake
so-
for a few days and keep it. At least that's what we
Very
do. We eat a lot of bannock.
And it gets baked, every other day or so you bake bannock, and it bakes fast because this is a dry recipe. This is something the girls will talk about next time.
It's whole week.
There you go. So reflector ovens, a great way to cook. If anybody has used them, we'd be keen to hear your stories.
Yes.
And the other thing we use is a Dutch oven. A Dutch oven is basically just a big iron or aluminum pot,
On a canoe
and
trip,
it
it's
has a
aluminum.
snugly fitting flat lid. Well, on a canoe trip, it can be anything. If you're carrying this in your backpack, be a different story. But it's a good sized pot, so you can bake pretty much any size thing in it. The lid, you want to keep, it needs to be snug or overhanging, and it's best if it's flat. Other than that, anything will do. The process is simple. You put whatever you're baking inside, you make a little pile of coals underneath the Dutch oven, you build a fire on top, and then you manage those two things, the coals underneath and the fire on top, while the baking happens. So it's pretty simple. Although it is like the reflector oven, you do have to pay attention because you have to keep the coals going underneath and you have to keep the fire going on top. I have a little more detailed article written about this, just with a little more detail in it, that we'll have Jim post on the website that you can read, and maybe if you're interested, get a little more information. But this is how it works, and before you know it, whatever you got in there is baked to perfection. So it's a simple thing to do, and it's a simple process. It just takes a little bit of patience and attention. But the nice thing about a Dutch oven is that you don't need a Dutch oven to cook that way. 2 frying pans works very, very well. This double frying pan technique was used for years by Knowles. That's how they taught people to cook during their courses. One frying pan is just slightly bigger than the other one. Everything else works exactly the same. And this is the standard fire setup. So you'd start out by building a regular little, you can't see that, a regular little fire. You let it burn down towards coals. And you take some of that fire and you put it at the other end under the teapot. And you keep that fire going while you've got coals at the other end. And that way you can just get more coals from the fire as you need them and put them on your little pile of coals. Then you keep your fire going on top, and it works just like any other kind of Dutch oven. And it's simple and easy. And a lot of people, I mean, if you've got 4 or 6 people, you've probably got 2 frying pans anyway. So you don't need the extra Dutch oven thing to carry along if you don't want to. We use this system for years and years and years. And there you go. Another one just baked absolutely perfectly. So those are the things that we carry when we're canoeing to cook that we wouldn't carry when we're cooking on backpacking or biking or skiing or any of those other trips, where you got to be really more careful about the things you bring along. But if you're cooking over fires, a fire grate or a firebox and a couple frying pans, reflector oven, you can do just absolutely amazing things. You're limited only by your imagination as far as cooking on a fire goes. So as far as we're concerned, that is the end of part 1 of Camp Cookery. So you can all look forward to part 2. But I'm keen to hear any of your ideas on things that you guys use and any things you might do differently. But that's about it. James?
Well, Doug and Jim, thank you so much. I've seen you do this in the field, and I didn't understand how simple it is. We've got some comments in the chat. Let me just run through them, and then we'll ask for people to just speak up and ask additional questions. Aluminum Dutch ovens now, Mary says. Karen Messenger uses briquettes for cooking with the Dutch oven.
Well,
And
yes, but then somebody has to carry the briquettes, but that's
yes,
perfect. Yes.
she has Eric to do that.
Oh, excellent.
Mark Lund adds, for our Dutch oven, we keep a trivet and baking pan in it. Greatly reduces burnt bottoms on cakes, pies, etc.
Absolutely excellent. It just means you don't have to pay quite as much attention to the coals underneath. That's perfect.
Dave Stark has been adding a whole bunch of items in the chat where people can get access to these. So thanks to Dave for that. And everyone, if you're not used to following the chat, you can save the chat at the end of the night, and it's tends to be a gold mine of things that you might not have had time to make note of during the event, but consider saving the chat. There, Dave Stark is encouraged to go back to cooking on fire because of your inspirational talk.
It's fun. Cooking
It's fun.
on a
Absolutely, Jim.
either way, reflector or Dutch oven. Lots
Now,
of fun, and it does take concentration. You cannot leave it for a second. If you need something, send somebody to get it. Don't leave the fire.
Now, does anyone else have a question here? You can either use your digital hand under the reaction tab at the bottom, or you can use the chat, or just jump up and down and I'll see if I can see you.
The only thing, while people are thinking about what they might want to say, the only other thing I was going to mention is that one of the biggest fears people seem to have about cooking over a fire is that horrible question of, what if it rains? Well, it doesn't really matter. As Jim mentioned before, everybody has a tarp, and you just put it up high enough so you're not going to melt it away when you're having your little fire, because these are just little fires that we use for cooking. There's no bonfires or big campfires going on here. So the little fires, so tarp usually does really well. And it's amazing what you can cook in the rain. And gathering firewood isn't nearly as hard as you think. Just a couple of dry pieces of wood, split. You can get dry wood, and don't let weather like rain discourage you from using a fire. Sorry, go ahead. Anybody else that had anything to say?
I just wanted to say, Doug thinks that pencil-sized wood are logs. He gets more heat out of less wood than anybody I've ever seen. He hates gathering it, but he loves burning it.
Richard says we have a hook and lifter that works well with the Dutch oven lid. I can have the fire on it and check the contents. And Dale and Colleen, upside down cakes with the fruit on the bottom really works well to prevent any burning. Rhubarb, blueberries, apples.
Excellent.
Pineapples.
And Marie Olney, pick wild berries and make a 1-egg cake on top for berry pudding.
You guys are all up for the next issue, which is the girl who's going to be talking about cooking and recipes and stuff. But
it's
that
nice
one
to hear how many people are doing this kind of thing.
Absolutely.
We have so much fun with it.
Absolutely. I was going to mention. I was just going to mention that whoever had the thing they mentioned about lifting the lid, we just use a stick, which of course fails from time to time, but most of the time it works okay. There have been times when we've dumped the whole lid fire into the baking, but we try not to do that.
And Chip has just put into the chat, would everybody please be ready to share recipes in the next show? Pam Little adds, just keep a small package of starter in your barrel like birch bark to help, I assume, on a rainy day. Gary Fisher was asking, does anyone use a stick stove?
I think that's what Karen was talking about.
Well, they're a little bit different, but we don't use them.
Oh, that's the conical thing. The stick stove, boil water in 28 seconds or something.
I think that's it. And
you can buy small little fold up, put together stick stoves and make a quite impressive little fire and cook quite a bit with pencil sized sticks.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. They're basically a small metal firebox, but they're a very small fire and they don't take much wood, and you can produce lots of focused heat and cook on them quite well.
Yeah, it might not be desirable for a big group.
Yep.
But you know, if the cooking's quite small and you know, no imprint on the environment whatsoever.
Excellent.
Now, Don Mitchell, would you like to talk about the new requirement for random camping pass here in Alberta for the Eastern Slopes?
Oh, Jim, yes. I just came up because I'm just heading up to Nordegg to paddle down to Rocky later this coming week, and noticing the new requirements that you require both the wildlife identification number, or WIN, because it's being handled by that organization, and you have to pay for a random camping pass. This is very new as of June 1st, so I'm going to guarantee on the big rivers like the North Saskatchewan, they will be out checking. They do have an app you can put on your phone, so You can have the proof of your having purchased the pass to go random camping.
So is that
And
a price per night?
it's either $25 for 3 nights or $30 for the season. In other words, they want you to pay for the year to keep it simple. You will require a wildlife identification number, and I'm not sure how much that is. I had one from 20 years ago. I had only used once. So I was able to rejuvenate that for $6. That they nickel and dime me to death on this one, to say the least.
Yikes.
Where,
And it's
where
on
can
the
we,
eastern slopes, anywhere from pretty much the entire eastern slopes right down to Waterton.
so that's any crown land,
Well, the crown lands on the eastern slopes.
right? And where can people find this information? Can you send a link to Jim?
Just go. Yes, just go online. I'll just find. I've got the link here, and I'll send that to you.
Well, thank you for putting that in the chat. That's good information because a number of us are hoping to do that.
I just
let's
don't want people
see.
to get caught up and have to pay a fine.
And, you know, if you've got recipes to share, please send them to us at CanoeingLive@gmail.com. Grant Myers, he's got lots of things. He's got a stick stove with a battery fan that works very well. How about from, I knew this was from Sid Fraser. How about the dingle stick method? Have you heard of that, Bucky and Doug?
I know what she means.
Go ahead, Sid. Tell us all about it. You're muted, Sid.
There you go.
Yep.
You know, I haven't seen it down in this part of the world at all, actually. And where I became introduced to it was for the longer ski trips, where we pull sleighs and go for long time periods, like 6-8 weeks. And which is, by the way, very similar to canoeing. It's like you just start dragging around a canoe in the wintertime, 2 sleighs, and you're using the vehicle of snow rather than water, or frozen water, I guess. And so what we do is we dig down in the winter time, and then you have a pile of snow, you have your kitchen, you cut down about a 2-inch tapers, and then you jam it into the snow, and that the weight of that snow, and it stays in there. And then the dingle is simply a smaller branch. Usually it's a willow, and once we've cut them for the trip, with a few notches in, and you hang it over, and then you've got these notches that you hang the bale of your water and you cook on. So you don't need a grill of any kind. And but it comes in handy as well in the summertime. You simply take a log, you wire it off, like split the log that penetrates, goes down, is you use the weight of your food bags or anything that you want. It projects up. You have your dingle stick that hangs over top. And again, you put your pots on it, like hot, medium, cool. And it also, though, especially in the wintertime, allows you to dry a lot of gear, because you have this nice suspended log. And if things are really wet, then you can be drying things. Sometimes we'll do 2 sticks. We'll have a cooking stick and a drying stick. But I don't know if anyone's ever come across that. It's common up north, but I haven't seen it down here. And again, if in the summer, perhaps if it's a situation where you don't have a grill, for example, something tap into it, or your surface or something around you is a bit awkward, then you can use something like that.
Yeah, that's the classic. Well, the cantilevered stick is quite classic, but it's actually the classic 2 forked sticks and the rotisserie stick hanging across, like you'd see in all the old movies and cartoons. No grill, just a horizontal stick laid in 2 forked sticks at the end, and you can hang stuff on it. You can use whatever kind of dangle stick you want, and that's absolutely classic. And the cantilevered pole is just a more simple
form of that. Yeah.
Form of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
It's just hard to get those sticks into the ground in Canadian Shield granite.
But that's the thing, is you don't need to.
Yeah,
you just cantilever it on and put the weight of your gear bag or something on top, and you're good to go.
Yeah, or another big piece of granite.
Exactly. Rocks, whatever. Sometimes I'll take a duffel bag and just put some rocks in and you're good to go. Just another method to consider, or even try out just to have some fun with it.
Excellent.
Thank you very much, Sid. I've been waiting for that explanation. I remember the first time you tried to describe that to us.
Well, this year we'll actually do it.
Okay.
Cool.
All right. Any other comments? I think I've been through everything in the chat.
Oh, come on, you guys, keep them busy.
Well, we all like eating in the bush, and we like it fast too, I think. I do.
Well, baking isn't incredibly fast, but it's satisfying and fun. Well, there you go.
I was going to ask, what's the preferred method if you had to make a choice between the Dutch oven or the reflector oven?
I would never want to say. Jim would probably want to say.
Too controversial.
No, I like them both.
Yep.
Doug's in charge of the Dutch oven. I'm in charge of the reflector oven. We
The-
have
the
both.
The reflector oven certainly of that type is certainly more compact and lighter than a big Dutch oven. But at the same time, if you're just using 2 frying pans that you already have, then there's nothing additional to carry at all. So play with them both.
Yeah, that's the best thing, I think. Try them both. Different strokes for different folks.
All right. Well, I want to thank you, fellas, for putting together that presentation. I really enjoyed the photographs because it really showed what you were describing. And 3 cheers for you two.
Oh, Doug did about 99% of the work.
Oh,
Well, Jim, you were eloquent at your time too. Now I've got, let's see, I've got a question. We've got a few extra minutes here. You know, some of us are thinking of going to Saskatchewan, northern Saskatchewan for maybe 10 to 12 days. And at least right now, it looks a little forbidding. Has anyone got some ideas a little closer to home of 10 to 12 day canoe trips?
I just talked with Rick Dreidiger today. Can you guys hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
go ahead,
And
Glenda.
he said that the fires are contained. They're not growing right now in their area, and that people might have to decide, you know, one spot over another. But he feels that people could come up, but it is a bit smoky up there, but it's damp and it's getting to be less. So that's what I know from Rick Dreidiger today.
Good news. Good news.
Thank you, Glenda.
for those of you who don't know, Rick Dreidiger runs Churchill River Outfitters out of Mississippi, right on the Churchill River in northern Saskatchewan.
Mark, do you have any suggestions for 10 to 12 day trip? You're on mute. Mark, you're on mute.
There we go. The
There.
longest I've paddled in the area is about 7 to 10 days. So I'm
Good enough.
mostly in and on around the Churchill. Besnard and Black Bear Island Lake being a favorite location.
What about options here in Alberta for that length of time?
Paddle upstream on the Athabasca. You don't need
Yeah.
very much distance. Shorter car shuffle.
Well, the Athabasca is certainly one of the rivers that allows you the longest wilderness experience. You know, with some reasonable stops for reprovisioning along the way too.
Thank you very much. All right. Well, I'm going to, after thanking the gentleman, I'm going to screen share again here. See if I can work my magic. Did it work?
Yes, it did.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Just let me. Every week, we'd like to show some photographs that viewers have sent in.
Is that the famous Molly Seagull from CBC?
That is. And Devin Ingram, they were caught in the Lake Louise Rapids this week. And I was, I tended to take bursts with my camera, but I've started shooting video and then just going for individual slides within the video. So this one is, we just picked the right time to show them in a little bit of a hole. Look at, it's too bad they don't have fun when they go canoeing. Now, I just got ahead of myself. Here we go. Doug McKown took me on a stretch of the Kananaskis River that I'd never been on this week, and it was a real treat. Narrow, shallow, but it was moving quite nicely. Now, this is a test. Does anyone know what mountain is in the background there?
South End Mount Kidd.
Whoa, that's a geologist talking. It is Mount Kidd, the south end. And do you see the beautiful anticline, syncline? When I saw that in the distance, my heart started to warm and Doug just paddled us right to it.
Just
Thank
to let you
Doug.
know, Bucky and Jim are both geologists, so that's why you get this sort of stuff.
I'm a recovering geologist.
Okay, what else have we got here? This is the same stretch. And that's Brian Armstrong and myself. I very rarely paddle in the front of a canoe, and I quite enjoyed it. Brian's a great stern paddler, and it gave me more time for photography.
Do you want us to send you some of that stuff down to Kansas?
To Kansas. All right. Here's another picture on the bow. Chip and I, and there's our dog. You can see the back end of that dog. We're just pulling out of an eddy. And I have my GoPro dangling on a hockey stick out the back. And I quite enjoyed taking that shot. Well, there's the famous Molly. Here's the same bit of land, and both of these folks are on the show tonight. Sid Fraser in the stern here, and Marlene Jones, again, going down the Lake Louise Rapids. The water has dropped significantly in the last 2 weeks, and we've got that nice, beautiful blue-green color. And we had a guest family from Saskatchewan come through town. Brian Sauer, Coldstream Paddling out of Saskatoon. And he and his wife and two daughters. Jim Buckingham led a trip around the Banff Springs Golf Club. And there's another nice mountain picture. Does anyone know what that mountain is?
Rundle.
Linda. Good for you, Linda.
A former Banff resident.
Yeah.
It was an easy one.
It was an easy one. I think we've got another one. Now, if you folks know us, Chip and I, we've had this lovely puggle, Lacey, she's 11 years old now, and she is quite often with us. She's a whitewater dog. And last week, we got another puggle. So it's 9 weeks old now, calling her Luna. And there they both, Lacey's teaching Luna the ins and outs of the canoe. And looking ahead, we've got Chip Olver, Mary Buckingham, and Donna McKown. My mistake for not recognizing Donna in this promotional piece. They are calling this Canoe Cooking Cornucopia. And they're going to be sharing some of their experience and hopefully sort of moderating experience from you folks as well. So either send some recipes in early, CanoeingLive@gmail.com, and we'll talk about them on August 29th. Devin and I mentioned when we started Canoeing Live in April of this year, one of our non-negotiables was that we couldn't have many programs during canoe season. And so we're down to about one a month over the summer months, but we plan to come back strong in the fall once we finish the paddling season. So I hope that you'll all come out on August 29th for this one. A few announcements and then we'll sort of go to open mic. Just always safety first and foremost. We get very, it's easy to get complacent and we've got to have safety first. And we saw a group of 20 people loading into the Bow River at Truckers today, and they had a good safety briefing going on. And, you know, we see a number of drownings throughout North America, and they almost all have to do with people not wearing PFDs. So we'd like to reinforce that imperative. Our recordings are all posted on Canoeing Live website. You know, remember, Doug McKown led us off with safety. Tina, Marika Barzo-Guy talked about no trace, clean, dry, and dump, and we're all doing that. And Mark Lund talked to us about trip planning and Google Earth. And I want to thank them all again. And if you have missed those episodes, they're all on Canoeing Live website. And today's presentation will be up within a couple days. We encourage you to bring a friend on August 29th, and you too can submit your photos and we'll highlight you in that portion of the show. And one thing Devin and I always want is to encourage engagement and community building. And so we invite you to stay after the show ends. We always promise to end by 8:30, but we'll leave the meeting going. And 3 weeks ago, I think 29 of us stayed for an extra half an hour, and it's just open mic at this point. Now, I'm just gonna look at the chat. Are there any comments that anyone would like to make? Just unmute yourself and go for it.
Just while you're doing that, Jim, I was gonna mention when whoever was talking about the licensing requirements for the red deer and stuff, I don't know if everybody knows that currently all the people using the waterways in the national park have to fill out a certificate of authorization or whatever they call it before you go on or in the river. And this doesn't just apply to boaters. It applies to fishermen. If you're going to be walking around on the river, anyone at all is supposed to fill out one of these things before you go on the water, anywhere in the national parks here. There's all these little kiosks set up at all the normal access points to the waterways. And they have a little card, and you have to fill out the first part saying you swear up and down and sideways that your stuff is absolutely clean and hasn't been used in this river for so long. And just a few little questions. You take that with you on the river, and you leave the other half in the little box, or you give it to a parks employee. So you're supposed to carry one of these certifications filled out with you every time you're on the river for every individual that's on the river. So they haven't completely thought this through really well, but that's the system that's out there right now. So if you're traveling in the parks and you look at, one of the normal entrances to the waterways, you'll see these little kiosks, steel box. You're supposed to open it up, get one of these cards, fill it out, take half with you on the river, and leave the other half there. So just if you see these things out there, that's what they're all about. The purpose is to keep from transmitting outside organisms among the waterways, but that's how the system works right now.
Thank you very much for that, Doug.